They said the war began with cannons, but that was a lie. For Elias Whitmore, the American Civil War began the moment his father did not come home. It was April of 1861 in a small town outside Springfield, Illinois, where the land rolled gently and the cornfields had not yet learned the meaning of blood. Elias was 13, thin as a fence rail, with hands already rough from farm work and eyes too old for his age. On the evening Fort Sumter fell, the telegraph line crackled at the local office, and by dawn the town knew. Men gathered in clusters, voices low, faces tight. Flags appeared where none had flown before. Speeches were made by men who had never fired a gun, and promises were spoken that would take 4 years and more than 600,000 lives to break. Elias's father, Thomas Whitmore, was a school teacher. He believed in the Union the way some men believed in God, quietly, stubbornly, without spectacle. When Lincoln called for volunteers, Thomas did not cheer. He simply folded his coat, kissed his wife Margaret on the forehead, knelt before Elias and said, "Remember everything. One day this country will need remembering more than fighting." Thomas enlisted with the 33rd Illinois Infantry. He was gone within a week. At first, the war felt distant. Newspapers arrived days late. Battles were names without faces: Bull Run, Wilson's Creek. The town sent off boys with music and brought back rumors with black borders. Elias helped his mother run the farm. He learned how hunger crept in slowly, how fear arrived at night, how silence could be louder than cannon fire. Then, in October of 1862, a letter came. It was not in his father's hand. Margaret Whitmore read it once, then again, then sat down as if the floor had risen to meet her. Thomas Whitmore had been wounded at the Battle of Perryville. Not killed, the letter said. Missing. Last seen helping another soldier from the field. Missing was a word that left no grave, no prayer, no end. Winter came early that year. Elias chopped wood until his hands split. He listened to men argue in town about states' rights and abolition, about whether this war was worth the cost. He noticed how none of those men were missing fathers. In the spring of 1863, when Elias turned 14, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life and quietly intersect with some of the most critical moments of the Civil War. He would find his father. He did not tell his mother. He could not. Instead, he sold his prized possession, a pocket watch Thomas had given him, to a traveling merchant. With that money, he bought boots too big for his feet, a second-hand coat, and passage south on a supply wagon heading toward Tennessee. The war did not look heroic up close. Elias saw burned farms, empty towns, men with limbs missing, and eyes hollowed out by what they had seen. He learned quickly not to ask too many questions and to say less. When soldiers asked his age, he said 16. When they asked his purpose, he said work. By summer, he had attached himself to the Union Army, not as a soldier, but something far more invisible and far more dangerous: a runner. The Army was always short of boys who could move fast, blend in, and carry messages without attracting attention. Elias was perfect. He learned how to memorize orders so no paper could betray him. He learned the sound of incoming artillery and the smell that came before a charge. He learned that courage was often just fear that had decided to keep moving. In July 1863, Elias found himself near Gettysburg. He did not know the name then. He only knew the heat,
the flies and the thunder that shook the ground like an angry god. He watched men fall by the hundreds. He ran messages between regiments while cannonballs tore the earth apart around him. At one point, a dying Confederate soldier grabbed his ankle and begged for water. Elias gave it to him, knowing full well that kindness had no uniform. That night he slept among the dead. The Battle of Gettysburg ended, and the war shifted, though few realized it yet. Elias carried messages for officers who would one day be written about in textbooks. He heard rumors of a black regiment fighting with unmatched bravery. He saw surgeons working until their hands shook too badly to hold knives. Still, he did not find his father. In late 1863, Elias was captured. It happened near Chattanooga. He had been sent with a message and took a wrong turn to avoid a skirmish. Confederate cavalry spotted him. He ran, but a boy running looks the same no matter the side. He was thrown from his feet, tied and searched. They found nothing. That saved his life. Because Elias was not in uniform, he was not treated as a prisoner of war. He was treated as a nuisance, a spy perhaps, or just another lost child swallowed by the chaos. They sent him to a makeshift prison camp in Georgia. There Elias learned what war really meant. Men starved slowly. Disease spread faster than fear. Guards looked away when prisoners collapsed, because looking too long made you remember you were human. One night, while distributing water, Elias heard a familiar voice. Weak, hoarse, but unmistakable. "Eli?" He turned. In the dim light, barely more than a skeleton wrapped in blue union, stood Thomas Whitmore. They did not speak. They simply held each other and cried without sound. Thomas had survived Perryville. He had survived infection, capture, and months of imprisonment. He had not survived hope. Until that moment. Elias began planning immediately. Escape from Confederate prison camps was rare. Escape with a wounded man was nearly impossible. But war had taught Elias one truth above all others. Impossible was often just unexplored. Over the next few weeks, Elias memorized guard routines. He bribed one sentry with a silver button. He forged a work detail roster by copying handwriting he had studied obsessively. On a moonless night, during a storm loud enough to drown out footsteps, father and son slipped through a gap meant for trash disposal. They walked for days. Thomas collapsed twice. Elias carried him once. When Union patrols finally found them, the boy stood in front of his father with a knife raised, daring the world to try again. Thomas Whitmore survived the war. Elias did not return to Illinois the same boy who had left. He had seen too much, carried too much. When the war ended in 1865, Elias was 18, with the eyes of an old man and the memory of a nation tearing itself apart. Years later, Elias would write everything down, not for glory, not for revenge, but because his father had been right. One day, this country will need remembering more than fighting.